Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is TV Islam, and today we are honored to have a guest with us all the way from South Africa, Maulana Suhail Wadi, who is visiting Malawi on a short visit and while he's touring the region. Alhamdulillah, Maulana Suhail runs an institute in South Africa and also has a lot of activities throughout the world. So, Maulana, I would like to welcome you to Malawi, and I hope you have been having a pleasant experience, Maulana.
Assalamu alaikum, alhamdulillah. Yeah, it's been a wonderful experience. Although it's a very short trip, but it's been a very heartwarming trip.
I have to concur, that is a very short trip, and you have not done us justice this time, and we will be insisting on a longer trip. But alhamdulillah, can you give us some highlights about your activity that you are involved in and what exactly you do both in South Africa as well as worldwide?
So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. With regards to myself, I am involved in an organization called Ashraful Ulum. It's an educational institute, and under that institute we have a subsidiary organization which is called Ashraful Aid, which is a humanitarian organization. And I spend my time between the two organizations. So Ashraful Ulum is more in terms of education, development, education of ustads. That's why we conduct many workshops, many training seminars for those that in the educational space. And with regards to Ashraful Aid is an international humanitarian organization, and we do work development of individuals, intervention programs, disaster relief in South Africa and in many parts of the world.
Alhamdulillah, fantastic, mashallah. Alhamdulillah, I understand you've been through a tour of the region. You were in Lusaka for a couple of days, then you had a stopover in Nairobi, and then you came through to Malawi. How has your experience been so far, and what have you been able to, what advice would you give us as a region as we move forward?
So alhamdulillah, I've been to this area before, many years ago.
Right.
And coming now, being invited to do training workshops, to do organizational development, it's really amazing to see the development by our Muslim organizations in terms of the education space, in terms of schools, in terms of the prison services. And it's very admirable to see how our Muslims in this part of the world, whether it was in Zambia, the work that's been done in Kenya, the work that's been done in Malawi, and the progression and the impact that it's having on the population, and the service that Muslims are giving to humanity. It's really remarkable, really wonderful, and for that, I'm very grateful that I could be part and I'm part of the different communities and the institutes, and for them giving me that space to help grow the institutes, making it more impactful. So it's really been a wonderful journey. I know it's been a very short journey.
Very short.
And alhamdulillah, it's been very fruitful.
Alhamdulillah, and I understand you're also involved quite actively in the prison activity in South Africa for the Muslim Prisons Board, and you've had an opportunity to visit some of our prisons here and meet with some of the stakeholders. What do you feel is the way forward, and what advice would you give those that are working in the prisons in Malawi at the moment?
Alhamdulillah, I've been involved in prison work, chaplaincy. I've served as a spiritual care worker, doing chaplaincy in prisons in South Africa for many years. And then I've been in a management role with the National Muslim Prison Board. I was the Secretary General. And it's given me quite a lot of insight, because being also from working in the prisons myself,
yes,
to also in terms of in management level, and being the Secretary General of the National Muslim Prison Board allowed me in terms of growth of and interacting with government. We work very closely with government, and it's given me a lot of insight in terms of the work that is needed for Muslim offenders. And the whole premise of, people ask, why should you work in prison?
Yes.
But the hadith of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam is so beautiful, that kullu bani adam khata'un wa khairul khata'in at-tawwabun, that every son of Adam alayhi salatu wasalam is a sinner, and the best sinner is the one that makes tawbah.
Subhanallah, mashallah.
And our job and our duty, look, what they have done is they are now paying for it, that's why they're in prison. But our responsibility doesn't end there. Our responsibility is still to encourage the brothers, encourage the sisters that are incarcerated, that Allah Ta'ala is most merciful, and you still have an opportunity to turn towards Allah, and you will find Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala most forgiving and most gracious.
Mashallah.
And to protect the iman of offenders.
Right.
They're in harsh environments, and most of we are not Muslims. The prisons haven't been built for Muslims. So we Muslim minorities in prison, and the conditions are very harsh. There's hopelessness, and we are there to remind them, La taqnatu min rahmatillah, do not be despondent in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Subhanallah. One other part of your program was also training the trainers session you had with some of the Muslim workers, and I understand you are quite passionate about human resource development and how to move up a notch, especially when it comes to personal development. Could you give us some more insight on that in light of our current situation as Muslim workers and Muslim organizations?
So, Alhamdulillah, coming to Malawi, in South Africa, in Zambia, our Muslims have settled there for a number of years.
Yes.
And whether they've created institutions, madrasas, Muslim schools, masjids, Muslim prison boards, welfare organizations, and Alhamdulillah, they doing good work. But sometimes we have to take a step back, and we have to ask ourselves that, can we really improve? Can we improve even more than what we are doing? For the same amount in terms of the donation that's going in, can that donation actually be spent in such a way that it's leveraged to create a bigger impact? And the ustad that is there, can we make him more effective? The manager that is there in the institute, the mutawallis that are there, can we make them more impactful? So that it helps society, it helps Muslims. We create a better society, we're more impactful, we're changing the lives of people. And sometimes it's just a change in the mindset, whether it's in terms of the management, whether it's in terms of the mutawallis, whether it's in terms of supervisors, whether it's the field workers and the ground workers, that just sometimes a change in a mindset, you can impact much more people. So you're still doing the same thing, but the way you're doing it, you can become more impactful, you can help more people, and thus, inshallah, gain more reward for your akhirat.
Alhamdulillah. How was the workshop? Was it fruitful? Was it beneficial? How was the response from the participants?
So in terms of train the trainer, and this was a very strategic workshop, right, which I really enjoyed, because in our training there is different levels that we train. So the trainer was more aimed at mud management, and why I really enjoyed this workshop, because of the impact that it has.
Right.
When I done a sort of a quick analysis of the impact, in terms of the value chain that is there, in terms of the supervisors that are there, and I would say just with those supervisors that were there, they are actually impacting the lives of 20,000 children.
Subhanallah.
Even more, probably. 20,000 children.
That's a huge number, mashallah.
So if we can improve mud management in terms of the way they function, making them more optimal, making them more productive, making them better managers, this will have a ripple effect to bottom management and to people that are working on the ground, which in turn will have a better impact on the beneficiaries, which are our children.
Very true. So the community would then obviously benefit from that knock-on effect.
That's right. That's right.
Alhamdulillah.
So it's these type of things, you know, targeting and leveraging key and strategic positions, improving that.
Yes.
And sometimes
yes.
it's, you know, just having that conversation with managers, with supervisors, and you know, which shapes their mind,
Right.
makes them more motivated. Because sometimes, you know, if you so long in a field, you're doing something for so long, it actually becomes meaningless. You know, you
Yes.
get so used to seeing it every day, you
Becomes
don't realize
routine.
it becomes routine. And sometimes just to remind the teachers, to remind the mid management, what's the impact that you are actually having on the ground, and don't for a second think that what you're doing here, it's not really having an impact.
Right.
And just to remind them, to encourage them,
Yes. That helps.
don't forget what's the end goal, and don't forget what you are doing, how important it is for that child. That child is maybe staying in a rural town, but
Yes,
the impact
yes.
that you're going to have on that child,
And his whole life and generations to come.
and just changing maybe that ustad, making that ustad a better ustad, which will
Yes.
impact that child. And instead of the ustad now encouraging that child, changes that child's life. You have you know, within a short space of time, you will see meaningful change. You see
Inshallah.
meaningful impact.
Alhamdulillah.
You know, and they can be quantified as well.
Alhamdulillah, that's fantastic. Really, it's very motivational because we don't see very much human resource development and training initiatives going on. So this is a very welcome development. Alhamdulillah, one of the challenges, obviously, I've noticed you're very passionate about education from our ongoing discussions. When Africa generally has a youth bulge, how do we, and of course education is a key component of or a solution. How would you equate the two, and how would they marry together towards a sustainable and a successful future for Africa?
Education in any development program, whether it's in terms of organizations, whether it's terms in schools, whether it's in any sphere, education is key. And
Right.
whether we're starting with primary education and improving the lives of children, because generations turn very fast.
Very true.
We see in our own life, the last decade, where did it go to?
Right.
So every 2 decades, there's a new generation that's there. And so we have a responsibility that we need to ensure that the next generation that is going to come are equipped to handle their challenges.
Right.
So looking at education from also a leadership perspective.
Yes, of course.
So we're educating these children, but we're educating them in such a way where they can now lead the ummah. I think that's the mindset that when we look at education, we need to look at education in that way. That it's not only just, you know, education, but education with leadership, education with spirituality,
Right.
education with values. And even if a person doesn't come out of poverty,
Right.
but we made him a contented person, we gave him good values, we are still successful.
Of course. Yes. Very true. One of the activities I understand that Ashraful Aid is involved in is relief efforts. How have you worked within the region? I understand you've done a lot of work as well in Middle East and various other countries. What have you got planned in the region on the relief side? As you know, Mozambique recently had last year they had the natural disaster. Malawi had some floodings. How are you looking at as we move forward, working within the region as well on the relief front?
So Africa has a very close space to our heart.
Right.
It's one of our primary beneficiaries in South Africa, and we're talking about the whole SADC region, in
Yes.
even the whole of Africa. And we see so much of opportunity in Africa in terms of developing of future generations. So when we look at relief, we look at it in different stages.
Right.
So the first stage would be, you know, giving people like food security, job security. That's the one level
Right.
that you look at. You know, basic needs.
Right. Right.
And we try to help people. Sometimes people just need food,
Yes.
so we try to provide food. If a person, especially in terms of when there's disaster, like what happened in Cyclone Idai,
Yes.
that at that point in time, for that month or so, people just needed food because everything was taken away from
Yes.
them. So that's where we'll try to, we'll have our intervention programs, our relief, disaster relief programs. But that's the first phase. The second phase we then look at in terms of more a longer vision. So we look at in terms of skills development.
All right.
We look at in terms of education. We look at in terms of upskilling people, capacity building. The third part that we look at, which comes to like our workshops, is changing the way people think,
All right.
changing the way people perceive the world. And we believe that if you can change a person in his mind, no matter where he is, he has the potential of reaching great heights.
True.
If you look at in South Africa, you look at Nelson Mandela. He came from a rural town,
Yes.
and yet he rose through the ranks. He got educated. Obviously, all taqdeer of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he then changed the fabric of our society. From being from apartheid and oppressed society, it's an open society. We can practice our religion freely.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So it's these different levels that we need to look. When you look at development, when you look at relief, it's also ensuring we're looking at these different levels, helping people in terms of the base level, but also looking how we can empower people,
Right.
and also changing in terms of the mind, giving people hope, giving people a sense of vision, a sense of purpose.
Right.
Because if you change a person in his mind and in his heart, the sky is the limit.
Alhamdulillah. You've given a very interesting and a very eye-opening perspective to relief. We've always been, well, not we, but I have always thought of relief as just distribution. Now, obviously, you're giving a much broader vision to the whole concept of relief, where it actually goes right through to sustaining and looking after the communities. Alhamdulillah, that's really incredible. Having engaged with the civil society for some time, especially Muslim civil society, one thing is quite evident is that the lack of the presence of Muslim civil society in the NGO space. Do you have a similar scenario in South Africa, and how are you looking at addressing it, if at all?
There is still a major lack of Muslim participation in civil society. But let's not make a mistake. Muslims are doing phenomenal work.
All right.
There's fantastic NGOs, civil societies, Muslim activists. But unfortunately, a large number have sort of kept it to themselves, that we just work within our own communities. And we haven't exposed the impact that Muslims are making in the world.
All right. All right.
And so our philosophy, and there's a few organizations like Ashraful Aid, Gift to the Givers, Al-Imdad, that has actually partnered with government, with other NGOs, in a sense of showing and showcasing the work that Muslim participation.
All right. All right.
And I think if we start thinking in those terms, especially here in Malawi, seeing the amount of institutes that we have, the madrasas that we have, it's now showing people what work that Muslims are doing.
Right.
And in this way, it's almost a sort of a passive dawah.
Yes.
And one is in terms of dawah, but one is in terms of harnessing institutes that are there. So if you have a madrasa that's in the rural area, that could serve as a community center.
Yes, of course.
Because people are already coming to the masjid. They're already coming to the madrasa. So that could serve as a community center to help people, whether it's a fight against poverty, whether it's the fight against HIV and AIDS, whether it's educating people on cleanliness.
Right.
And if you look at Islam, is the solution to it.
Yes.
If you
yes,
look at
true.
HIV and AIDS, the solution to it is abstinence, which Islam teaches.
promotes.
You look at hygiene. Islam teaches you it's the base of a Muslim
Yes.
to be clean and to be hygienic. You go
Wash
to the
your
bathroom,
hands.
you must wash your hand.
Yes.
It's a Muslim concept.
All right.
So we've already got that infrastructure. It's a matter of us utilizing it and maximizing it and leveraging it. That inshallah, and we will then get that leadership role. Other organizations will see what Muslims are doing.
You're right.
And we are already doing it. It's just a matter of repackaging it and organizing ourselves a bit more professionally.
So having worked with government on the relief aid aspect, have you seen advantages and benefits with that kind of a relationship?
Most definitely. So our organization, Ashraful Aid, we've signed an agreement with provincial government in terms of disaster management.
All right.
And having that relationship, with informal relationships, signing agreements, it has made our life much more easier. Remember, government can't do everything.
Yes, of course.
The job of NGOs is to fill in the gaps.
All right, and support the.
So if there's a fire that is happening in Alex, it happens sometimes 1,000 shacks get burnt. You know, government has to respond, but where we fit in as human beings, we in Marlborough, based in Marlborough, Alex is next, so we have a responsibility.
Yes, of course.
But work by partnering with government, it serves us as a benefit. We have access to the site.
All right.
We have with the police, for police protection. Again, sometimes it happens at night. You need security.
Right. Yes.
That is provided. We are able to then do our work in a much more systematic way.
All right.
Because you're dealing with 1,000 people. How do you sort out who needs help? Whether it's a triage system, so government does the one part, we do the other part.
All right.
So it's a good partnership. They appreciate, government appreciates it, and it makes our life much more easier, and we are much more effective.
Right.
So we can deploy aid anywhere in the Gauteng province within an hour.
All right.
Because of the relationship that we have with government.
Right.
We don't have to go and ask for approvals now. We want to go do
because
this.
you already have the MOU in place.
We already have that MOU.
Yes.
We have a working relationship. So within an hour, we can deploy aid anywhere in the province.
That's quite impressive, alhamdulillah. So, Maulana, what is your advice to organizations and specifically Muslim organizations that are working in the country in the various sectors?
My advice would be that, alhamdulillah, we need to acknowledge the work. Sometimes we shoot ourselves down too much.
All right.
We're not doing work. Alhamdulillah, we're doing work.
Alhamdulillah.
We're doing great work. We've been doing it from sometimes many generations.
Yes.
Our fathers were there, our grandfathers were in the masjids, the community organizations, they were mutawallis. Alhamdulillah. It's up to us now to take it to the next level.
Right.
To take it out to take out the message of Islam. So this would mean that us as organizations, we need to professionalize ourselves.
Right.
The way we run our organizations, the way we do our work, the way we bring in our volunteers,
Yes.
we need to professionalize it. Create processes, encourage people, market the work that we are doing. It's an integral part. Marketing the work that you do, whether it's in your communities, whether it's in the broader society.
Right.
People are always lacking volunteers, people
Yes.
that can help. But if you're marketing your work, you actually encourage people
To
that
help.
how can I be a participant?
Yes.
Of
course.
I've seen, today we went to a hospital and went into these wards, these children's wards,
Yes.
and seeing the impact that our Muslim organizations has done.
Alhamdulillah.
People are sleeping with no proper mattresses. The place was like a dungeon.
Right.
They've painted it. They've made it beautiful. They've given some degree of humanity, where people can sleep on a mattress.
Yes. Yes.
For those mothers that have to look after their sick children, made it a bit more comfortable for them.
Right.
How wonderful that is. It's really, really amazing. And if we can get more people, and the beauty is that it's run by, a large portion of it is run by volunteers.
Alhamdulillah.
So if we can encourage more volunteers, we can do so much more.
Right. Alhamdulillah.
And the world, Africa needs us. I think we're going to be an integral part as Muslims in developing Africa.
Right.
And inshallah, if we put ourselves forward, we professionalize ourselves, I think inshallah, and we all do it important our niyyah is for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if we are sincere, I think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inshallah will accept the work that we do, and we will see the impact of our work with our very eyes, inshallah, in our lifetime.
Inshallah. Alhamdulillah. Maulana, you have come after almost 19 years, I think, for a real trip to Malawi. I hope it's not going to be another 19 years when you come again.
No, inshallah, we'll come again.
What are your plans again for Malawi as we move forward?
So the National Muslim Prison Board, alhamdulillah, they've started a few years back, and I was called in also to consult with them how they could improve. I think one of the future goals that they have in a very near future is to have a National Muslim Prison Board conference in the very near future, just to collaborate with all different organizations that are working in the correctional centers, in the prisons. And inshallah, we have some hope that, they've given us a sort of an invitation that please come and present at the conference that we will be having. So I think that will be done in a few months' time.
Inshallah.
So I make a niyat, inshallah, that we'll be back again.
So we are hoping to have a long-term beneficial relationship and a regular, not like 19, more like 19 days time, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, Maulana. Thank you for your time and your effort to come to Malawi.
Amen. Jazakallah khair.
That was Maulana Suhail Wadi from South Africa, giving us his precious time and words of wisdom. Jazakallah khair from TV Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.